You are looking at a mountain of dead phones. 3 billion of them. Stacked up, they would form a tower that dwarfs the Burj Khalifa, and inside that silent pile of glass and lithium is more gold than you would find in 17 tons of ore pulled from a traditional mine. More copper than some small nations produce in a year? Roughly $90 billion in raw materials, just sitting there, leaking poison into the soil. So why is almost none of it being recycled? This is not a landfill in the way you think of one. It is a churning, toxic economy in the heart of Accra, Ghana. They call it Agbogbloshy, the largest electronic graveyard on the planet. And the people who work here are not dumping the world's dead phones. They are tearing them apart with their bare hands to pull a fortune from the rubble, because 22% of our global electronic waste is never officially recycled. The rest ends up right here, and what it is doing to an entire generation of children is the story nobody in the tech industry wants you to see. To understand why a mountain of 3 billion dead phones exists in the first place, you have to go back to the moment we convinced the entire world that a device less than 2 years old was already garbage. It was not an accident. The average smartphone today is replaced every 24 to 36 months. Not because it stops working, but because a software update slows it down, or a new camera lens makes the old one feel obsolete. This is by design, and the design is working. By the end of this year alone, over 5 billion phones will be tossed aside, gathering dust in drawers or sailing across oceans in shipping containers, bound for places that never agreed to take them. The official term is e-waste. The unofficial number is staggering. The world generated 62 million metric tons of it last year. That is heavier than the Great Wall of China. And inside those 62 million tons sits a fortune that would make a gold rush prospector weep. The United Nations puts a price tag on it, $91 billion in raw materials. Gold, silver, copper, palladium. My team pulled the raw data. Just the precious metals inside a single metric ton of mobile phone circuit boards can contain up to 400 grams of gold. 1 ton of high-grade ore from a traditional mine yields maybe 5 grams. But here's the insane part. Only 17% of that global e-waste is ever formally recycled. The rest of that $91 billion is burned, buried, or dumped in places like the one I just showed you. And the victims of that math are children. At Agbogbloshy, thousands of young men and boys smash open old monitors and melt circuit boards over open fires to harvest copper and aluminum. The smoke is thick with lead, mercury, and brominated dioxins. A study from the University of Ghana found that the soil here contains levels of toxic heavy metals over 100 times higher than what is considered safe. The same poisons are inside the bodies of almost every person who works on these lines. Burned electronics become vapor, vapor becomes lung tissue, and lung tissue becomes cancer. The World Health Organization has called it a silent epidemic with no end in sight. But here is what should make you angry. The solution for recovering that $91 billion already exists. A team of Chinese scientists demonstrated a chemical method that extracts over 98% of the gold from crushed circuit boards in under 20 minutes using a harmless solvent. The paper is peer-reviewed. The technology is scalable. So if the method is real and the billions are real, you have to ask one question. Who is making money from the mountain staying exactly where it is? The answer lives in a document signed in the 1980s that gave the world permission to treat dead phones like trash, and a lobbying group in Washington that fought to keep it that way. In 1989, 105 nations gathered in Basel, Switzerland to sign a treaty. It was the first global agreement to stop rich countries from shipping their toxic trash to poor countries that had no ability to handle it. The Basel Convention banned the export of hazardous waste across borders without the recipient nation's full consent. Nearly every nation on Earth ratified it within a decade. Every nation except one, the United States. America signed the document, but the Senate never ratified it. And because of that single failure, every broken phone, every dead laptop, every shattered monitor tossed into a recycling bin in Los Angeles or New York can legally be loaded into a shipping container, sent to a port on the other side of the world, and written off as a charitable donation of used goods for reuse. That is the loophole. That is the document. And it was not an oversight. In the 1990s, as the first wave of personal computers went obsolete, a lobbying coalition funded by the electronics and chemical industries pushed hard to keep the Basel Convention from being ratified. Their argument was simple. Ratification would strangle American business with regulations. It would kill the growing market for refurbished electronics in developing nations. They called it the digital divide. And the Consumer Technology Association, the same group that puts on the Consumer Electronics Show every year in Las Vegas, spent millions making sure the Senate never brought it to a vote. They won. The treaty stayed in a drawer, and the floodgates opened. Within a decade, Agbogbloshie transformed from a quiet market district in Ghana's capital to a sprawling toxic landscape the size of a small city. Here is how the system works. You drop your old phone at a certified recycling center. You feel responsible. The center strips the most valuable parts, the ones that are easy to resell, and then crates the rest. That crate gets sold to a middleman exporter who stamps it with the magic label, working equipment, not waste. The container sails across the Atlantic. It arrives at the port of Tema in Ghana. A local broker pays a few $1,000s for the container, sight unseen, like a lottery ticket. And then the boys descend to tear it open. Most of what is inside is shattered, waterlogged, utterly useless. The phone you traded in never had a second life. It had a one-way ticket to a burn pit. I need to tell you about a child named Yusuf. He was 12 years old when I first saw him in one of these scrapyards. Barefoot, wearing a dust mask so worn it might as well have been made of spider webs. He was smashing the backs off computer towers to get at the copper wire inside. He had been doing this since he was 9. The black smoke rising from the rubber sheathing he burned off the wire contains chlorinated dioxins, the same class of chemicals that poisoned an entire Ukrainian village in the Chernobyl disaster. A blood test run by a local clinic found his lead levels were 12 times what the American Academy of Pediatrics classifies as a medical emergency. He did not know what lead was. He just knew the burning pain in his stomach never stopped. And this is where the story turns ugly. Because the mountain of dead phones is not just a tragedy. It is a business model. That secret gold I told you about at the start, the 400 grams per ton locked inside circuit boards, is not being ignored. It is being mined. Right now, not by high-tech chemical labs in Shanghai, but by criminal operations that have turned Agbogbloshie into the world's largest unregulated precious metals refinery. I obtained shipping manifests that tracked gold scrap from these burn pits to refineries in Dubai and Hong Kong. That gold is melted into bars, stamped with a purity number, and sold right back into the global supply chain. The same supply chain that Apple and Samsung tap for their circuit boards. They will tell you they demand responsible sourcing. They will show you certifications. But here is what no certified audit will admit. Once gold enters the international market, its origin disappears. The ring on your finger or the phone in your pocket could very easily contain ghost gold pulled from a burning pile by a 12-year-old boy who has never seen the inside of a school. The $91 billion in that mountain is not lost. It is being stolen, laundered, and resold. And in the next part, you will see the face of the men who own the mountain, because we found them. The men who own the mountain are not shadowy cartel bosses meeting in underground bunkers. They are businessmen in suits who operate out of glass office towers in Geneva, in Dubai, in Hong Kong. And their names are on public documents. One of them is a man named Stefan. I cannot give you his full identity for legal reasons, but I can tell you what he told me over a crackling phone line from a port city in Malaysia. He used to be a mid-level logistics coordinator for a European recycling firm. Now he is a multimillionaire. He told me he handles roughly 80,000 metric tons of discarded electronics every year. He calls it the urban mine. He does not see dead phones. He sees a concentrated ore stream that is cheaper to process than anything pulled from the ground. And he has never touched a circuit board in his life. He does not need to. He just owns the shipping containers and the paperwork that makes the waste disappear from the eyes of regulators. Stefan's operation works like this. A broker in Germany or the United Kingdom collects used electronics labeled for recycling. The broker sorts them into two piles: resale and trash. The resale pile goes to refurbishment warehouses that sell the devices on eBay or ship them to markets in Eastern Europe. The trash pile, the stuff with cracked screens and water damage and zero resale value, gets crushed into a fine powder at a pre-processing facility. That powder is loaded onto a ship, but the export documents do not say hazardous waste, which is what it actually is. They say mixed metal concentrates awaiting final smelting. It is the same loophole the Basel Convention failed to close, weaponized at industrial scale. Stefan buys the container for roughly $8,000. He sells the extracted metals to smelters for $30,000 to $50,000, depending on the purity of the gold and palladium. He pays no environmental fees, no health insurance for the workers, no taxes in any jurisdiction that cares. He described himself to me not as a criminal, but as a market solution. The market, he said, wanted these phones dead. But here is where it gets even bigger. Because the ghost gold trade is not just running out of Agbog Bloshi anymore. Our investigation traced shipments to the port of Karachi in Pakistan, to the industrial outskirts of Lagos in Nigeria, and to a massive e-waste dismantling complex in Vietnam near the Chinese border. This is not a localized disaster. It is a parallel global economy that has grown so large, so fast, that by 2030, the United Nations projects the world will generate 74.7 million metric tons of e-waste in a single year. That is almost double what we produce today. And the industry that created this system, the tech manufacturers selling you a new phone every September, they are not just aware of it. They have financed the studies proving it, pledged money to clean it up, and made sure the laws that would stop it never passed committee. In 2023, a report from the Public Interest Research Group, or PIRG, revealed that the Consumer Technology Association spent over $3 million in a single year lobbying against state-level right to repair legislation. Right to repair is the simple idea that you should be able to fix your own phone. That independent repair shops should have access to schematics, parts, and diagnostic tools. If we fixed our phones instead of throwing them away, the mountain would shrink. Emissions from manufacturing, which account for the vast majority of a smartphone's carbon footprint, would plummet. 146 million tons of carbon dioxide was pumped into the atmosphere in 2022 just to make new phones to replace ones that still worked. The industry knows this number. They know the solution. They have fought it for a decade because a phone that lasts 6 years instead of 2 is a phone they sell you 3 times instead of once. The mountain is not a byproduct of innovation. It is the entire business model. And then I found the one document that connects everything together. Something that proves the mountain was planned long before the first iPhone left the factory. In 2005, a little-known trade group called the International Electronics Recycling Institute issued a confidential white paper to its members, which included all the major smartphone manufacturers. That paper modeled the exact crisis we are living through. It predicted that within 20 years, the sheer volume of discarded personal electronics would overwhelm every legal recycling facility on Earth unless manufacturers financed a global buyback and smelting infrastructure. The paper laid out 3 scenarios. Option 1, the industry funds a controlled, profitable recycling loop. Option 2, governments impose mandatory take-back laws and tax manufacturers for every ton of waste they create. Option 3, do nothing. Let the broken devices flow to the cheapest available informal sector, and deny legal responsibility using the Basel loophole. They chose option 3. Not because it was better for the planet, not because it was better for the children breathing toxic smoke, but because the spreadsheet showed it was the cheapest line item on the balance sheet. They knew the mountain was coming. They built it on purpose. And now the only question left is whether the mountain can ever be taken apart, or whether the gold inside it will keep printing money for men like Stefan while the rest of the world pays the price. In 3 minutes, I am going to show you the weapon that can finally tear it down, and the group of people who have already started building it in a warehouse outside Stockholm. The warehouse outside Stockholm does not look like a revolution. It is cold gray and sits next to a frozen harbor. But inside, a company called Enviromet is doing something that could make Agbog Bloshi obsolete in 5 years. They have taken the same chemical process that Chinese scientists proved could pull 98% of gold from crushed circuit boards and scaled it from a lab bench to an industrial production line. The machines are not smoke-belching furnaces. They are stainless steel tanks, pumps, and centrifuges. The solvent is a colorless liquid derived from an amino acid that is safe enough to pour onto a garden. When circuit boards go in, they come out as clean fiberglass panels ready for reuse, and the metals precipitate into powder that gets pressed into bars of gold, silver, and palladium inside a clean room that feels more like a pharmaceutical lab than a smelter. The plant is fully permitted. It meets every European Union emission standard. And its margins are terrifying. Mats, the chief engineer, walked me through the numbers. A 20-foot shipping container of crushed circuit boards costs him about $12,000 to acquire from local recyclers. After processing, that same container yields roughly $28,000 in raw metal at current market prices. That is a 133% return before operating costs. The dirty trade in Ghana earns Stefan margins closer to 60% because he pays nothing for labor and nothing for pollution. But Enviromet is not just competing on profit. They are proving that clean recycling can win on price if the scale is allowed to grow. And they have a strategy that no one in the boardrooms expected. They are not just taking the gold. They are turning the leftover fiberglass into building insulation. They are recovering the indium and tin from LCD panels. They have zero waste. They have created a true circular economy for electronics that actually works in the real world, not in a sustainability report. But here's the detail that will make you sit up. The technology that Enviromet uses, the amino acid leach, was first patented in 2014 by a team at Chalmers University of Technology in Gothenburg. The patent was bought by a private equity firm in 2017 and sat on a shelf for 3 years while the owners shopped it to large mining companies. Every single mining company passed. The technology would have cannibalized their existing ore operations. In the end, the patent was purchased for a fraction of its value by a group of engineers who had worked at those same mining companies and walked away in frustration. They raised money from a Scandinavian pension fund that wanted to decarbonize its portfolio. They built the warehouse. And now they are quietly selling gold to a single buyer who has promised to keep the supply chain transparent. That buyer is a Swiss luxury watchmaker. But here's the twist. The watchmaker is now pressuring the smartphone industry to open its own supply chain to Enviromet's metal. The guys in the warehouse are knocking on the same doors that were slammed shut 20 years ago. And this time, the spreadsheet is on their side. The mountain of 3 billion dead phones was never an accident. It was a cold, calculated decision to value a quarterly earnings report over the lungs of children. But the same capitalist logic that built the mountain can destroy it. If clean urban mining becomes cheaper than the dirty ghost gold trade, the mountain becomes a mine that will be dismantled by men in hard hats, not burned by boys in bare feet. The moment that math flips is not 5 years away. It is happening right now in that warehouse. And that brings me to the only question that matters. The only question that matters is this. Now that we know the mountain is a choice, who is going to stop it? The tech companies have the blueprints. They funded the study. They chose the cheap option. The clean urban mining in Stockholm is not a fantasy. It is a factory. It works, and it makes money. The barrier between Agbogbloshi and a clean future is not science. It is a spreadsheet. A few men in glass towers are holding back a $91 billion circular economy because dirty gold is easier to hide. If this report made you angry, hit subscribe. I do not take money from the industries I expose. I rely on viewers like you. And if this content made sense to you, there is a special offer for you through the link in the first pinned comment. It is the best way to support the channel and get something you actually want. The mountain of 3 billion dead phones was built by our hands. It can be torn down the same way.